The history of Egypt. The history of Egypt dates back to around 3100 BC, when Egypt witnessed the birth of one of the oldest civilizations in human history. Its origins were along the banks of the Nile River, and it lasted for over 2,000 years, making it one of the longest-lasting civilizations in history. The ancient Egyptians referred to their land as Kemet, meaning the Black Land, symbolizing the abundance of clay deposits left by the Nile on its banks and in its delta during its annual floods. These deposits contributed to the fertility and renewal of the soil each year. The ancient Egyptian civilization added significantly to the global human heritage. The Nile Valley saw the establishment of the first centralized authority in history. They also excelled in knowledge of writing and contributed to the development of various sciences, including mathematics, engineering, medicine, and astronomy. They had knowledge of calendars and pondered on concepts such as resurrection after death, rewards, and punishments. This led their kings to build impressive temples and tombs, including the pyramids. They also had knowledge of mummification techniques, the secrets of which remain unknown to this day. Egypt went through various historical phases afterwards, coming under the rule of the Greeks, Persians, and Romans. The naming. In ancient Arabia, it was customary for people to derive names for places from distinctive features. Since the land of Egypt was characterized by its black alluvial soil, the ancient Egyptians named their country Kemet, which means the Black One. Additionally, the ancient Egyptians bestowed sacred names upon Egypt, indicating admiration and honor. The name Egypt itself originated from the Levant. It first appeared in a letter sent by Rib-Audai, the prince of Byblos, to Akhenaten, written as Matusu Misri, Matusu being an Akkadian word meaning land. Later, this name was found in Phoenician, Assyrian, Chaldean, Moabite, Aramaic, and Syriac texts. As for the Arabs, they named it Mizr. In Western languages, the name Egypt became prevalent, with both the Greeks and Romans referring to it as Aegyptos and Egyptus, respectively. This nomenclature continued in contemporary European languages, such as Egyptian in German, Egypt in English, Egypte in French, and Egypto in Spanish. Prehistory. Egypt, along with Mesopotamia and the Levant, holds a significant place in the annals of ancient human civilization. The peoples of these lands carried the torch of civilization for thousands of years, laying down the fundamental principles of human culture in writing, language, art, religion, administration, applied sciences, and architecture. Archaeological studies indicate that humans inhabited Egypt since the early stages of the Old Stone Age. Comparative studies of skulls dating back to pre-dynastic times, around 4000 BC, and historical eras reveal that Egypt was inhabited by two main racial groups, one with elongated skulls of African origin, and the other with rounded skulls from Eastern Egypt. The latter group, characterized as Arab, predominated over the older Negroid group. Researchers affirmed this through findings in the Levant and Syria discovered in Egypt, as well as Arabic linguistic features present in ancient Egyptian, both in vocabulary and syntax. The worship of gods introduced by Eastern Arab migrants in Egypt, including the great god Horus, an Arab deity described by Al-Damiri in his book The Animal, and corresponding closely to the free Arabian falcon in name and form, is another indication. Regarding language and writing, the Egyptian language was influenced by immigrants who arrived in Egypt from the end of the Stone Age due to droughts in the African Great Desert. Migrations also reached Egypt from the Levant through Sinai, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Red Sea in general. Thus, the ancient Egyptian language bore an Arab imprint, whether in its structure or vocabulary. The Greeks named Egyptian writing hieroglyphics, from which all subsequent writings in Egypt, hieratic demotic, derived. In the Ptolemaic era, Egyptians used Coptic writing. The early Stone Ages. Due to the length of these epochs, researchers have divided them into three periods: the Lower, Middle, and Upper Paleolithic eras. Researchers have found traces of the first era, up to 100,000 BC, in the Egyptian deserts, especially in the hills near the valley. These traces consist of polished stone axes, some of which have three faces, giving them a pyramidal shape. As for the remains of the Middle Paleolithic era, up to 35,000 BC, in Egypt, most of them took the form of small, geometrically shaped stone blades. It's worth noting that researchers haven't discovered skeletal remains of humans who lived in Egypt during the preceding two eras. Concerning the Upper Paleolithic era, up to 12,000 BC, its traces were discovered in southern Egypt, the Middle Stone Age. This era extends from 12,000 to 8,000 BC and is considered a transitional phase between the Upper Paleolithic and the Neolithic eras. Its remains included finely crafted small, sharp-edged stone tools representing various geometric shapes that dominated the previous era. The Late Stone Age. This era in Egypt spans from 8,000 to 3,200 BC. Various aspects of human civilization flourished and diversified during this period, marking a multifaceted civilizational revolution. Drought became a reality in the ancient Arab East, driving humans to innovate agriculture to provide their own sustenance. Nature could no longer provide food on its own. As a result, people migrated from the deserts to the alluvial plain on both sides of the Nile and its delta, after the Nile took its current course around 14,000 BC. Agriculture compelled them to establish settlements beside their crops. Villages and cities emerged from these settlements. The surplus yield led to the innovation of pottery for preservation. This gave rise to specialization, with occupations in pottery making, agriculture, and ornament crafting. This led to the development of crafts. Lastly, it's important to note that administration emerged in this era. Two main factors contributed to the early presence of administration in Egypt. The first was the agricultural community's need for security to protect their harvest from marauders. And the second was natural, as Egypt was surrounded by barren deserts that humans couldn't easily cross. The seeds of art, religion, administration, writing, and language sprouted in this era, culminating in the Copper Age, 4,500–3,200 BC, named for the Egyptians' ability to extract copper from its ores and use it alongside stone in toolmaking. Two main civilizations thrived during this era: the Naqada civilization in the far south of Egypt, Upper Egypt, which developed independently and was not influenced by other civilizations, and the Gurza civilization in northern Egypt, Lower Egypt, which was influenced by Levantine and Syrian civilizations. The presence of these artifacts in Egypt is evidence of a significant human migration from the ancient Arab East. They brought with them their god, Horus, represented by the free Arabian falcon in ancient Egyptian civilization. These migrants were called Shemsu Hor, meaning the worshippers of Horus. This migration significantly influenced Egypt's language, religion, art, and humanity. One of the most significant aspects of the dominance of the worshippers of Horus was their establishment of two united kingdoms, one in the Delta and the other in Upper Egypt. It's likely that On, Heliopolis or Ain Shams, was the united Egypt's capital. However, this unity didn't last long. The south separated from the north, and Egypt became comprised of two kingdoms, each with a political and religious capital, a deity, a king, and a crown. The white crown was for the southern kingdom, while the red crown represented the northern kingdom. Unification of the two kingdoms. The kingdom of Upper Egypt sought to achieve unity with the kingdom of Lower Egypt. To accomplish this goal, they engaged in fierce wars, culminating in the unification of the two kingdoms. The Scorpion King's mace head and King Narmer's palette are considered crucial artifacts, bearing inscriptions depicting the wars between the two sides. The Scorpion King fought against the people of the north and emerged victorious. However, it was Narmer who achieved unity between the two territories, symbolized by his coronation with the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. Thus, Egypt was unified around 3,200 BC, and Narmer became the first ruler of the initial ruling dynasty of Egypt, likely bearing the title Mina, the Archaic period, and the Old Kingdom. Modern researchers refer to the eras of the First and Second dynasties as the Archaic period, 3200 and 2780 BC, also known as the Two Thin Ones, named after Thinis, the first capital of the kings of this period. One of the significant features of this era is the step pyramid complexes. Each king of the first dynasty constructed two mastabas, one in the north and the other in the south, with one of them, likely the northern one, serving as the king's tomb. King Mena is credited with establishing the capital city of the state, called Memphis, in the later period. As for the Old Kingdom, it began with the Third Dynasty, 2780 BC, and concluded around 2230 BC. It encompassed the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th dynasties. Researchers refer to it as the exiled era, due to the exile of the capital, or the era of pyramid builders, because of the unprecedented pyramid construction undertaken by its inhabitants. The First Intermediate Period. The days of the Old Kingdom came to an end primarily due to economic reasons. The kings of this period constructed magnificent pyramids with little economic utility. They allocated estates and agricultural lands to fund perpetual religious rituals, exempting the priests from many duties. This resulted in a heavy burden on other Egyptian classes with less privilege. Egypt experienced severe weakness, leading to the independence of regional rulers. Arab Bedouin tribes flowed into northern Egypt and the Delta, causing a disruption in trade with the Levant and security disturbances. These conditions persisted throughout the 7th and 8th dynasties in the Delta and the capital region of Menfi. However, stability was restored in the era of the 9th and 10th dynasties, during which three principal powers dominated Egypt. 1. The Arab Bedouins, who were stationed in the Delta and established Menfi as their capital. 2. The Anasians, who were stationed in the Fayum region with Anas as their capital. 3. The Thebans, who made Thebes their capital. A fierce war erupted among these powers, ending in the victory of Thebes, and thus Egypt was reunified for the second time under the leadership of Montuhotep II. Middle Kingdom King Montuhotep II is considered the greatest ruler of the 11th dynasty. He re-established the unity of Egypt and protected its eastern borders. He constructed a temple and tomb west of Thebes, preparing a plateau next to the mountain overlooking Thebes, where he built his temple and tomb. This architectural innovation inspired Queen Hatshepsut's engineer to construct her temple in the same style beside the king's temple and tomb. Montuhotep II left several kings who adopted the same name associated with the god Montu. However, the days of this dynasty ended in 1991 BC, succeeded by the 12th dynasty. Its founder was King Amenemhat I, and names like Amenemhat, Amun in the forefront, and Senusret, son of the gods, were prevalent among the kings of this dynasty. They are remembered for relocating the capital from the far south to the Lahun region north of Fayum, where they constructed their pyramids. They protected Egypt's eastern borders and witnessed the flourishing of Egyptian trade with the Syrian coast. Egyptian texts mention that the ships of the Egyptian fleet were constructed from Syrian cedarwood. Additionally, the ancient Egyptian language reached its zenith in the entire history of ancient Egypt during this period. However, this state weakened due to both internal factors, competition among the ruling family members for the throne, and external factors, migration of Nubians to Egypt from the south, and migration of Arab tribes from the north, which led to the weakening of the Egyptian economy. Thus, the days of this state came to an end in 1786 BC. Second Transitional Period. The Second Transitional Period is considered one of the weakest periods in Egyptian history. The rulers of Egyptian provinces gained independence, and the country fell under foreign control, whether from the north or the south. This period included the rule of dynasties from the 13th to the 17th. Egypt was subjected to the occupation of the Hyksos, as their control over Egypt since 1730 BC was the most significant negative event in Egypt's history during this period. They held power during the 15th, 16th, and 17th dynasties. According to Manetho, they were called the rulers of shepherds, and according to Gardner, rulers of foreign lands. When the princes of Thebes Seqenenretau and his sons Kamosi and Amosi forcefully expelled them from Egypt and pursued them to Palestine, the modern state of Egypt was established. New Kingdom Era. The New Kingdom of Egypt is one of the greatest states in ancient Egyptian history. It's not an exaggeration to say that every nation has its heroic era, and Egypt's Pharaonic era achieved greatness after the establishment of the New Kingdom. The Egyptians built an empire extending from the Euphrates in the north to Sudan in the south. Egypt was a formidable state, and all contemporary nations in the region wished to establish friendly and good relations with it. The New Kingdom included three powerful ruling dynasties, the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties. At the beginning of the 18th dynasty, matters followed the pattern of the past in administration, religion, art, and Egypt's foreign relations. The early kings of the dynasty, from the founder King Ahmose I to Queen Hatshepsut, prioritized internal affairs over everything else. However, in the reign of Queen Hatshepsut, 1490–1497 BC, two factions emerged, each with its supporters and principles for Egypt's advancement. The first faction, led by the Queen, had its main supporters among the senior state officials and the chief priests of the god Amun. They believed that Egypt's rise could only be achieved through cultural elevation and economic prosperity, surpassing neighboring nations. The second faction, led by Thutmose III, the legitimate heir to the throne of Egypt, believed that Egypt's rise could only be achieved through military force, allowing for expansion and control over neighboring nations. The Amenemhat period. Egypt remained strong militarily and economically until the reign of King Amenemhat III, who leaned towards luxury and indulgence in worldly pleasures, causing a weakening of the kingdom. This weakness tempted its enemies to aim at dismantling its empire in the Levant. They succeeded, leaving behind his son, Amenemhat IV, Akhenaten, a brilliant philosopher. His philosophy advocated noble human principles transcending killing, greed, lies, and hypocrisy. This philosophy contradicted the priests of the god Amun, whose interests were affected. Consequently, Egypt was divided between supporters and opponents of Akhenaten. Noteworthy is that this bitter conflict weakened Egypt, and its enemies were tempted to attack its possessions in the Levant. The Syrian kingdoms, which had once shown affection for Egypt, sent message after message to Akhenaten and his father, pleading for help, but received no response. Egypt lost most of its empire in the Levant upon Akhenaten's death. The Hittites, under the leadership of Suppiluliuma, and the Amorites, under the leadership of Abdi-Ashirta and his son Azaru, practically became the lords of the Levant. After Akhenaten, Egypt was ruled by Tutankhamun, the priest Ai, and finally, the army commander Horemheb, 1335–1308 BC. Since Horemheb had no heir, the rule passed to Ramesses I, the commander of his army. Thus a new dynasty was established, prevailing over the previous dynasty. It was named the Ramesside dynasty, just as its predecessor was called the Thutmoside dynasty, based on the common name Thutmose among its kings. The 19th dynasty. The 19th dynasty is considered one of Egypt's great dynasties. Since the beginning of this dynasty, its kings aspired to restore the lost empire in the Levant. King Seti restructured the Egyptian army, dividing it into three divisions named after the great Egyptian gods, Amun, Ra, Ptah. He also repaired the road that connected eastern Egypt through Sinai to Palestine. His son, Ramesses II, benefited from his father's achievements. He led his father's divisions, adding the Set division to them, to Syria, to reclaim Kadesh under Egyptian control. The famous Battle of Kadesh took place against the Hittites, led by Muwatalli. The hostility between Egypt and the Hittite kingdom continued for 20 years. In the 21st year, Egypt agreed to a peace treaty with Hatti, aiming to repel the Sea People's threat. The kings who ruled Egypt after Ramesses II focused on repelling the Sea Peoples, who repeatedly attacked the Western Delta. The war was fierce, with one of the most notable kings being Merneptah. However, this dynasty's rule ended due to disputes over the throne among its princes. This was followed by a period of chaos, until King Setnacht came and established a new dynasty, known as the 20th dynasty. He restored order and stability to the country. The 19th dynasty. The 19th dynasty is considered one of Egypt's great dynasties. Since the beginning of this dynasty, its kings aspired to restore the lost empire in the Levant. King Seti I restructured the Egyptian army, dividing it into 3 divisions named after the great Egyptian gods, Amun, Ra, Ptah. He also repaired the road that connected eastern Egypt through Sinai to Palestine. His son, Ramesses II, benefited from his father's achievements. He led his father's divisions, adding the Set division to them, to Syria, to reclaim Kadesh under Egyptian control. The famous Battle of Kadesh took place against the Hittites, led by Muwatalli. The hostility between Egypt and the Hittite kingdom continued for 20 years. In the 21st year, Egypt agreed to a peace treaty with Hatti, aiming to repel the Sea People's threat. The kings who ruled Egypt after Ramesses II focused on repelling the Sea Peoples, who repeatedly attacked the Western Delta. The war was fierce, with one of the most notable kings being Merneptah. However, this dynasty's rule ended due to disputes over the throne among its princes. This was followed by a period of chaos, until King Setnacht came and established a new dynasty, known as the 20th dynasty. He restored order and stability to the country, the 20th dynasty. The era of the 20th dynasty was an extension of the previous dynasty's reign. This dynasty continued its efforts to eliminate the threat posed by the Sea Peoples, who were concentrated in the western part of Egypt. King Ramesses III engaged them in 2 battles, the first in his 5th year of rule, and the second in his 11th year. The decisive military campaign against the Sea Peoples, which completely eradicated their threat, took place in the 8th year of his reign in the Syrian territory. The Sea Peoples navigated through the straits and laid waste to Kadesh, Ugarit, and Carchemish. They then moved southward, carrying their women, children, and belongings on ox-drawn carts, and stationed in the middle of Syria, perhaps a resting point before advancing to the Nile Delta. However, Ramesses III did not give them respite. He confronted them in a fierce battle on the current Palestinian land and defeated them. He also engaged them in a successful naval battle on the northern coast of Egypt. Thus, Egypt dealt with the Sea Peoples, and no further threat arose after Ramesses III. After Ramesses III, 8 kings who all bore the name Ramesses ascended to the throne. However, Egypt suffered significant weakness during their reigns. Consequently, the priests managed to seize power and establish a new dynasty known as the 21st dynasty, the late period and the end of dynastic rule. This era began with the 21st dynasty, 1087, 945 BC. However, Egypt was under the rule of 2 royal families. The first in the north, led by King Smendes, whose rule extended from the delta to Asyut, with its capital in Tanis, Zoan, and the second in the south, led by the priest Herihor, who made Thebes his capital. Harmony prevailed between the 2 ruling families, resulting in a fusion that led to the unification of both dynasties under the rule of Bonaparte, the king of the south. Nevertheless, Egypt was weak in its relations with the Levant, to the extent that the king of Byblos expelled the Egyptian messenger, Herihor, because he couldn't afford the price of the timber he sought to purchase from Byblos. The Assyrian occupation of Egypt. A unique phenomenon prevailed in the ancient Arabian region. Any power that emerged sought to control the entire region, as its security and economic prosperity were dependent on it. Thus, Assyria sought to dominate the Levant, which it eventually achieved through the efforts of Tiglath-Pileser and Ashurdan. Egypt realized that occupation was inevitable. Therefore, its king, Taharqa, worked to encourage the Palestinians and the cities along the Syrian coast to revolt against Assyria. It's likely that Egypt was behind the revolution of Tyre, which Ashurdan personally came to besiege. He left it under siege and headed towards Egypt, where he seized its capital, Memphis. As a result, all the rulers of the Egyptian provinces acknowledged Assyrian authority and paid tribute to its king. After a few years, King Taharqa revolted against the Assyrians again. However, the Assyrians defeated them and reached Thebes for the second time. The 26th dynasty. Psamtik I, the founder of this dynasty, is considered one of Egypt's formidable kings. He managed to expel the Assyrians from Egypt with the help of the kings of Lydia. He also succeeded in annexing the south to his kingdom in the delta. Following Psamtik I, several kings ruled: Necho II, Psamtik II, Apries, Amasis II, Psamtik III, with Necho II standing out among them in his achievements and actions. The kings of this dynasty worked diligently to revive the Egyptian cultural elements that prevailed during the Old and Middle Kingdoms, be it in language, art, religion, Pharaonic titles, or the way of writing inscriptions. However, their fate was not favorable, as Egypt quickly fell prey to the Persian invasion. Persian domination of Egypt. The Persians managed to control Egypt after the Battle of Pelusium, Tel el Farama, led by King Cambyses in 525 BC. However, Egypt did not accept foreign rule. It established ruling dynasties contemporaneous with the Persians on parts of its land, the 27th dynasty. Fierce battles ensued with the Persians, and Egypt received military aid from Athens. Thus, the war continued intermittently between the two sides, from 400 BC to 332 BC. During this period, the 28th, 29th, and 30th Egyptian dynasties ruled. In 333 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persians in the Battle of Issus and entered Egypt the following year, welcomed by the Egyptians who saw him as their liberator from oppressive Persian rule. Alexander died in 323 BC, and his generals divided his empire. Egypt fell to the commander Ptolemy, thus establishing a new ruling dynasty in Egypt, Ptolemaic Egypt. After Alexander's death, Egypt came under the rule of Ptolemy, the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which continued to inherit power until the Roman occupation of Egypt in 30 BC. Important aspects of this era include the transfer of the capital to Alexandria, making Egyptian land theoretically property of the ruler. The best and widest lands were granted to the Greeks, especially the military, while Egyptian farmers became laborers on state-owned lands or owned small plots. The state monopolized the cultivation and production of oil plants, such as sesame, castor oil, flaxseed oil, and others. Trade was also monopolized, importing wood, metals, wine, olive oil, fruits, slaves, and horses, while exporting wheat in return. The Ptolemies used the ancient Egyptian language in decrees, laws, and decisions, especially those related to taxes. They also utilized the Egyptian hieroglyphic and Demotic scripts. Additionally, they employed Coptic writing with Greek letters, as seen in the inscriptions on the Rosetta Stone, which were engraved during the Greek period with the mentioned scripts above. Roman Egypt. After a bitter struggle between the Roman ruler Octavian on one side and Antony and Cleopatra on the other, this conflict culminated in the naval battle of Actium in the Greek territories in 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra were defeated and retreated to Egypt. However, Octavian pursued them and entered Alexandria, the capital of the country, in 30 BC. Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide, making Octavian the ruler of Egypt. He declared Egypt a Roman province directly tied to the emperor's person. A special system was established for it, where it became forbidden for any member of the Senate or high-ranking politicians to visit Egypt without the emperor's approval. Egypt remained a Roman province ruled by Roman officials until 639 BC, when it was conquered by the Muslim Arabs under the leadership of Amr ibn al-As. Thus, Egypt became a part of the Arab East geographically, historically, culturally, and in terms of its destiny. This historical inevitability has had a profound impact on events in the Arab East from the beginning of history until today. No significant event occurred in the region without being influenced by Egypt or influencing it. Egypt's security was intertwined with the security of the region, and the pillars of human civilization, manifested in the unity of language, art, and religion, were deeply rooted in the heart of Egypt. This video was a brief overview of Egypt's history. We will provide more detailed information about the lives and secrets of the pharaohs in the near future.